because finally it got there. Obviously, we're pleased. We're pleased that the band's being recognised. We're pleased that the fans have got something they want. For us and for them.
Absolutely, but it takes 25 years to get eligible.
That's true. It's a bit of a wait.
Here we are almost 25 years later, and we're getting in the Hall of Fame. So it took them a long time. But it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. Was it something that you aspired to? Was it something that really you felt was important to put, an exclamation point on really the hard labor, the changes, everyone who's gone through this adventure for so long? Was it important to you to be there, or is this sort of like the cherry on a very special cake already?
Well, I think it's important if you're playing music all of your life and you get this award thrown at you, which is very, very prestigious. And I just like to thank all the fans straight away. But at the same time, we basically, I guess you get it, nominated twice, and then you kind of go, okay.
Yeah.
And then finally you get in. It's kind of like a little bit of a play down, but it's great now.
When I was at JFK Stadium on the Relayer tour, I figured all the votes were in anyway. That was 100,000 people.
Well, there you go.
I think, musicians take it differently, but individually we take it differently. Some are calmer, some are more excited, some have hungered for it, some have avoided it maybe even, some people get awards and they don't want them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways you can react to it.
Because it can sometimes represent something that's not of the same nature of what your initial impulse and your ambitions were.
Yeah, and it's a mixed bag. The sort of acts that have been inducted anyway, it's a very, very mixed bag. So you kind of don't know your luck. Really.
Yeah. Now, we lost founding bassist Chris Squire in 2015. How important was it to him to get into the Hall of Fame? Because this was something that came up a couple of times over the years, and, you were on the ballots and such. Was that something that he felt was important, or was it, again, this is just the way it is, we continue because that is the work we do?
No, Chris was big on this. He thought this was not only for the fans, but also industry showing respect to a band that, was an album band fundamentally, and only had a few of those songs that got in the charts, in the single charts, but we didn't mind because we were an album band anyway. So, maybe that's part of the reason it took a bit longer.
Well, the thing that I found interesting was that, people talk about progressive rock like it's a niche movement, and in fact, it was and is still some of the most popular music in the world. You look at a record like Close to the Edge, a million-selling album with only 3 songs on it. Most classical albums at least have 4 movements. Mm-hmm. This was something that you were really driving to, poetic extremes and still actually connecting with people on a very visceral, emotional, and pocketbook level.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we used to take things to the limit, let's put it that way.
Close to the edge, yes.
Yeah, they all thought we were crazy when we did Topographic. It was like, you doing what? And luckily, Atlantic Records backed us up and said, go ahead, guys. And actually, nowadays, it's one of the most listened to albums.
I am curious, how did you propose this? Like, you go into a record company, and okay, so you had 3 songs on the last record. Now that you're telling them, we're only going to have 1 song on 4 sides.
Well, we were very lucky to have Amit Ertegun believe in us. So, sometimes he'd come up to me, pop in the studio and say, is the whole album as good as this? Of course, I said, yeah, the whole album's as good as what you're hearing, But, they had trust, they had confidence in us, we'd proved our position. So we just kind of delivered these things, and they went, wow, they had to kind of grapple with it. But usually they did a good job at that.
Yeah, except he said, side 1 is 27 minutes long, you're going to have to cut it down to 21, because that's all we can get on the disc.
Oh,
they found out
there was a bit of that going on. So.
Yeah, side 1 was originally 27 or 28 minutes long, but before we overdubbed, we cut it down.
Actually, Jeff, I'm curious, what were your impressions of Yes as a band, as a legacy, when you first joined in 1980? Because even up to that point, the changes and the extremes were pretty substantial.
Yeah, I was very much when I joined them, I was very much in awe of the band, because when I was studying for my A-levels at school, I was really into the Time and the Word album, and then I got into the Yes album, and so I sort of followed them through from that point, and it was quite amazing suddenly to be in that position of being in Yes, and from what I'd done before, I'd never really been in a band like that before, so it was an amazing experience, and it kind of set me on a course in many ways for all the other stuff that I've done since.
Well, actually, John and Billy, you almost have the same kinds of experiences in that you actually joined the groups at different junctures at a point where a lot of the history was already substantial. You were really coming in as things were moving way forward.
Mm-hmm. I met these guys around 87, 88 when I made an album called World Trade, which had its yes-isms about it. And this is when ABWH was in existence, and these guys were without a singer. And one thing led to another, and I got offered to be the lead singer of Yes, which I, at the time, said absolutely not. But I love working with you guys. If I can produce and play whatever you need, I'm here for you. And I've been in and out and involved with production and live since. And unfortunately, with Chris's passing, he asked me to step in for him and do this, which was incredibly heavy and emotional, because this guy was my hero and my mentor and my friend for 30 years now. And it's something I couldn't say no to when he asked me. And I love the band, I love these guys, and want to keep it going. And that was Chris's desire. So it's a strange road that fate is on. And by the same token, now Jeff and I are in Asia, and it's the same thing with John Wetton, who asked me to step in there. So it's a very surreal life right now.
Well, John, if my research is correct, you were actually born the year Fragile came out.
That's right. Yeah.
So what was your first eureka moment as a Yes fan?
Well, let's see. My first exposure to progressive rock was Rush. That was just something more comprehensible at that age, high school years. And then I was reading interviews about how they were influenced by Yes. So I thought I would go back and hear the early records. But my really only exposure to Yes at the time was Owner of a Lonely Heart and 90125. I couldn't really quite make the connection. I just wasn't musically mature enough, or perhaps, or whatever it might be. But it was definitely two different bands in a way. So it took me a while to, discipline myself to listen to those early albums. I had never heard anything like that. It was a complete new exposure to it. So I just stuck with it, and I listened to those albums. I think Tales was my first album. So I just
you still went in head first, right?
I'm in.
You went to the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
So as I matured as a musician, I grew to love those albums so much that Yes became my most favorite band. That was the sacred band for me. So as Billy says, it's completely surreal to be here right now, just as it has been these last 5 years I've been in the band, to be on stage with my absolute favorite band, doing the music I absolutely love on every level.
But we like having you with us, John.
Yeah. Well, as a singer, how do you sort of not divide your mind, but figure out not only what you have to be respectful of and address in the music and the singing, John Anderson that came before, and also bring a voice of your own, and as a writer, the last album, trying to bring something new to the information, because the whole point of this history is that it's not just one band and one period. It's an idea.
Mm-hmm. I see it more as I don't want to sound corny, but it's almost like a heart connection, and I think that's what anyone out there and beyond has made in relation to how this music moves them. And that's just what I always had. So I just knew, just get in there and sing the music you love, and if it's from the heart, somehow you're going to put your own spin on it eventually, and it's a work in progress.
And Yes is one of those things, too, that's always had forward motion, and that's one of the attractive things since I've been into it, is that it's constantly moving forward and regenerating itself, and it's a bigger...
Although you said that, John Davison singing a lot of John Anderson, of course, he's just been singing Trevor Horn for a whole album.
That's true.
That is
and that's
true,
the same
too.
for Jeff.
Well,
he doesn't...
John. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff isn't here to play Rick. He's here to play Tony Kaye,
Yeah.
Patrick Moraz, and that's the kind of breadth of the band we've created, or the monster we've made.
I'm just here to play one guy.
But it is interesting because we should mention the members being
And,
inducted.
the truth be known, these two guys know more about us than we do.
Shh, don't tell anybody that.
Because we had the members being inducted, Steve Howe, Alan White, Chris Squire, John Anderson, Rick Wakeman, Bill Bruford, Tony Kaye. I was very glad to see that. Trevor Rabin. But the thing is that, in a way, what's being inducted here is an idea and a continuum. It's actually a story that refuses to end.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
I guess that didn't work as a question, did
I
it?
used to
It wasn't really a question. Puts things in our mind, but we'll move on.
Yeah.
Lovely. No,
It's just a
nice.
forward motion. Yes,
Like
it's
the
just
music.
constantly going forward, and this is what it is right now, and we're going forward.
You know what? It's kind of like Yes has always looked at the horizon, but wanted to find out what was on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what I always loved about the idea of progressive rock. It became sort of like a descriptive, whereas the root in that word is progress.
Yes.
Taking something and moving it forward, whether it's composition or improvisation. And, I liked Tales from
favorite
Topographic
album.
Oceans because it was such a challenge.
Yeah, it's my favorite, that one. We played Ritual on the last tour, and it was just completely, for me, it was just surreal as can get, because
I
that's one of
agree.
my favorite, and
Hey,
I
you
think
gotta
it's...
admit, Chris's bass.
Oh, that was one of my favorite Squire
Huge.
bass things ever, was on Ritual, and I got to play it with the most amazing musicians on stage, so what can you say?
I think this is actually a good way to segue into our first song of the hour. We have John and Steve will perform, and Jeff, Alan, and Billy will bring lots of aura to this performance.
Billy's
I may
helping.
sing, you just
He
never
may
know.
sing. Join in. Everybody do what they need to do. This is Leaves of Green.